It's the same thing that makes every football player who's ever been gay not want to say that they're gay because they don't want to be associated with RuPaul's Drag Race and what is, I think, a lot of times pictured as in-your-face, excess, over-sexualized, feminized, flamboyant version of gay culture that is the dominant version of what is seen.
Tired of the sensationalized sports takes? Fed up with the same old rundown? Forget that. Welcome to Balls Out with Shane Wicks and Ophny Escalante. We're peeling back the layers of the game to explore the untold stories, emerging trends, and influential personalities that are reshaping sports, bringing you bold, in-depth analysis with a splash of West Coast flair. It's time to shake things up. Let's go Balls Out.
I'm Ophny Escalante. My co-host, Shane Wicks. Shane, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you this morning, Ophny?
I'm well. It's sunny, and we have moved into our new studio, which we're still working out the kinks. Shane, what's going on with you today?
Just coming off the 1 year sober high.
1 year sober.
Yeah.
We got into that a little bit last episode. We talked a little bit about alcohol and your struggles with alcohol. And I remember some of our personal conversations, if we just get right into it. You had talked one point about how that game from a player's perspective and somebody who grew up training to play football. We're going to talk about your baseball background. Eventually we're going to come to that. But to grow up training to be a football player, the workouts, the diet, the psychology. You mentioned at one point a phrase that's not unfamiliar to me, but it's going to help for our purposes. You talked about the imposition of will, which is something that has to happen, especially in the position that you played, right? I mean, all of football really ultimately comes down to the imposition of will because it's such a brutal sport. And on the line, I mean, that's your job, right? To impose your will on the guy in front of you. That's what we call the trenches in football. So that imposition of will, talk to me about, reconciling that with who you are, or at the time who you were, but having to also display this, what do we call that? A machismo, or you have to be an athlete, you had to be a dude.
Yeah.
Right? Talk to me about that, please.
Definitely. At the time, what I really hoped and kind of envisioned was that I could keep some kind of, I don't know if it's, I think it's the same kind of thing that makes us want to desire that, football's still a game that's played, college football is still a sport that's played for the love of the game, but, we also want to be able to bet large amounts of money on it in Vegas, right? So
I like betting.
Yeah.
Shout out my gambling site, Sportsbook.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that desire to have your cake and eat it too, right? And I think my expectations were that I would be able to come out and that things would remain unchanged. And that was just an unrealistic expectation for a lot of reasons.
Let me interrupt there for 1 second. When you say changed, that things remain unchanged.
Yeah.
Unpack that a little bit.
I mean, I think the thing that stops most people from coming out is that, fear of like, oh, what are people going to think or say about me? Or am I going to still have the same friends or the same job? Or, insert blank here. There's many legitimate fears.
As a result of you coming out to your boss at the time, or?
Yes and no. I mean, so the guy that I was coaching for at the time knew well in advance of my TED Talk, because he and I were close, and it was just a conversation that I felt like I wanted to have with him. But then once it became public knowledge, and, you know, I took a stance of, however you want to slice it, you know, pro LGBTQ in sports is basically the simplest way to put it, right? Which that at the time wasn't quite the lightning rod for controversy that it is now, but it was certainly gaining traction.
You say took a stance. What did that mean in terms of your position initially as a player? Because there had to be two times, or was it all at once? And you mentioned the TED Talk. We're going to come back to that. But did you come out in high school and then have to again pack that up, for lack of a better term?
No, I did not. You know, I didn't come out until I was, 21 privately to close family and friends. And then I think it was like about a year later that I did the TED Talk, which is about as public a forum as you can get.
But talk about your time coming up playing football. When did you start playing football? How old are you?
7th grade.
7th grade, and that was flag football?
No, that was full tackle.
And that was in Nevada.
It's similar to the Pop Warner system, but it's called SYFL, Sierra Youth Football League.
What was your initial attraction? At this time, were you having feelings about your orientation? Did you know? Or?
I mean, as much as a fucking 13-year-old kid knows about that kind of thing, I mean, was I certainly attracted to some of my friends? For sure.
Say that again?
Was I attracted to some of my male friends? Absolutely. I can look back on it now, right, with hindsight, and recognize what that was. But at the time, you have no idea what's going on, right? I mean, you're a confused teenager, and that world is complicated enough.
And this was high school.
Actually, middle school is when I started playing football.
Yeah, middle school is those are brutal years.
Yeah, dude, I've taught middle school
for
a couple years. The best and worst age of humanity,
I served as the dean of students in a middle school in Tucson, Arizona, the year that the kids came back from COVID.
Oh, God.
So I had to go to Arizona for personal, familial reasons. While I was there, I had to spend a year there. I decided I would probably get an online job because you could teach online at the time. Right?
Yeah.
Because the kids were coming back, and this district I got a job and said, hey, we'd love to hire you as a flex teacher. Remember the double eagle flex defense? Does that ring a bell to you?
Yeah.
Double eagle.
Flex.
So anyway, they called me the double eagle flex teacher, right? And to make this short, they didn't have enough kids to justify paying me what they were going to pay me. They thought they'd have 50 to 100. I had 3.
Yeah.
So they asked me to go down to middle school to serve as the dean of students because they were having discipline issues after the first 2 weeks of school.
Yeah.
I'll just say this, my career working with students, I think, took a real hit. Those kids came back different. They came back different. Middle school kids, they went from 5th grade to 7th grade, from 6th grade to 8th grade. And those years, which was our conversation led me to this, are hard enough. I mean, I saw in the first week of school, I suspended like 70 kids. They'd never had anybody suspend anybody.
Good on you for actually suspending, because I came from a school system where it did not matter what a kid did. They would not be suspended.
Yeah, this whole COVID thing changed it, because it was a sexual assault. It was online crimes, it was vandalism. It was all the TikTok bullshit, like the hit a lick and the slap your teacher trends. It was bad. But I say all that to say that, man, trying to figure out this affinity you just gained for a really male, brutal, maybe I shouldn't say that, but a real male sport.
Right.
And then having to reconcile with your feelings of your sexual orientation. And on top of that, being in fucking middle school. I mean, tell me about that.
Honestly, at that point in my life, the hatred of gays for that came from my family and the church and all of that when I was much younger had pretty well resolved any, conscious recognition of the fact that I might be gay, right? So, in some ways, it was the furthest thing from my mind because I pushed it that way, It wasn't really until I was in college and, much older and honestly, in large part because of alcohol, I became willing to deal with and accept some of these really shitty realities.
Let's take that turn. Let's go down that road.
Yeah.
Let's talk about alcohol, because one of the conversations that we had earlier in our previous conversations on the microphone, you mentioned this phrase, and it stuck with me as a result of everything that you were going through. And we're talking about 17 years old. I'm going to come back to that progression, what it was like being in high school, certain probably gay football player, and what it was like in college, a gay football player. But I want to come back to this phrase that you said, and I think it was in relation to these feelings. Obviously it was, but where the alcohol got you. Should we... the phrase was, you said, the deepest betrayals come from the inside.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of interesting because I'm definitely the intellectual type in that I try to ignore my feelings by just, rationalizing my way out of things or, getting lost in something. I was really curious, because after my childhood, I had pretty much wholesale thrown the baby out with the bathwater, anything that came to religion, and sort of by extension spirituality, because they seemed, at the time I really couldn't differentiate the two. And
it took me a minute. I grew up with religion, but I found out later in life, as a result of some work that I had to do, some help I sought out, that spirituality and religion they work independently of one. They can work independently of one another.
Absolutely. I didn't, and I guess that sort of brings us back to the imposition of will, which was the only thing that I had. And,
wow.
When that is the key that you're using to try to unlock every single door, not very many doors are going to unlock for you because people know when they're being imposed upon, right? And they don't like it. So while, this cultivation of mindset and strategy and demeanor may be excellent on the football field and in the weight room and in certain capacities of life, on the whole, it is not useful. Like your ability to contain that shit is what's useful.
Let me make sure that I understand what we're talking about. This notion or this mentality of imposing your will can be useful. Well, it's definitely useful on the football field, right. But you begin to apply it everywhere. I mean, this becomes a principle which you apply in everyday practice, which makes you a person who, well, it would make me a person who I wouldn't like that much, right?
And I don't remember which movie or show this quote came from, but the problem with conquering the world is that one day it's going to want to conquer you back.
Hashtag Napoleon.
Is that what it was?
Well, no, I'm thinking of Napoleon as a
it might be. That's not an original quote.
But shout out Napoleon in the French. French ham is delicious, by the way.
You don't realize, necessarily how important friends are to your success.
How many of your friends growing up high school friends, let's call your 3-4 high school friends, are you still close with?
Oh, a number of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many of them knew you were gay when you were in high school?
No, 0.
How many of them know you're gay now? Well,
Any of them that are still alive.
And what was that like?
For the most part, pretty good.
Pretty good. Come on. Pretty good. What the hell is pretty good?
Yeah, listen, I think...
it's pretty good? A freaking milkshake from Jack in the Box.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I think it can be hard. If you had asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have told you what a victim I was and about how, some of the deepest, most profound
5
relationships...
years ago, you were not sober.
Correct. Some of the most deepest and profound relationships in my life blew up in my face as a result of people not being able to handle the fact that I was gay. It is a lot more complicated than that.
The fact that you are gay.
Right. And, while everybody, including myself, and it took a lot of therapy to realize that, I myself possess a lot of homophobia, right? Which any gay person out there is like, oh, yeah, I've heard that before.
Homophobia.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the more niche psychodramatic term for it is internalized homophobia, but
I like that.
It's the same thing that makes every football player, who's ever been gay not want to say that they're gay because they don't want to be associated with, RuPaul's Drag Race and what is, I think, a lot of times pictured as, the in-your-face, excess, over-sexualized, feminized, flamboyant version of gay culture that, is the dominant version of what is seen. And I love fucking RuPaul's Drag Race, right? And I've grown up enough to not, if they associated me with RuPaul's Drag Race today, I'd be stoked, right? What a flattering compliment, right? But that took me a lot of years. And
a lot of change, a lot of progress as well, right?
But more because here's the deal. It's not about society. Outside of...
Hold on a minute. It was way harder if you and I if we could get in a time machine and travel back to 1986, you and I together.
Right.
And we're the same exact people, we're the same exact age. We're doing a podcast in the 80s. People, what the hell is this? What are computers? And what's this? And what's streaming? Whatever. Just suspend disbelief for a second. This conversation would be way different.
Yes.
So societal pressure and societal progress and societal...
Right. Okay, so here's what I should say. It's not that it's not about society, right? Because obviously, we've had to make legal progress for minority status groups because it is or has been about society and, the intentional infliction of harm that we tend to do upon minority groups.
And let me just say, I want to come back to, I know who RuPaul is. I can't speak a lot on RuPaul. But growing up, again, we talked about our age difference, right? We're looking to see where those circles on that Venn meet. We've already gone there a little bit about how they will and how we'll explore that. But coming up, I never saw a television show where there were gay men on it, right? What a concept. Growing up in my house, that would have been, there's no way. Right? Again, we'll get into my Christian background when we really know who Shane is, right? My two favorite shows in the last 10 years, Schitt's Creek, number one, and number two, which I just recently started watching obsessively, is Modern Family.
Oh, God,
right?
I love Modern Family.
Both shining examples of the progress we've made just in terms of, I guess, exposure or what's acceptable or what's not taboo anymore.
Right.
And man, doesn't Modern Family do a fantastic job of exploring our conversation with that the character Cam, right?
Yeah.
He's a dude who grew up on a farm, is a cowboy, right? But he's as gay as can be, and they did it brilliantly.
Gay as a goose, as they say in the South.
Gay as a goose.
I don't know. I don't like that.
You know what? Gay as a goose. I'm going to write that down.
When I say that
Gay as a goose?
that it's not about, society, we are at a point where still imperfect and, room for progress. The legal protections afforded most of us are pretty substantial.
When you say most of us, you're talking about the gay community or
yes,
minorities in general?
Both.
Well, I guess
I'm only going to speak.
Minority is minority, right?
I'm only going to speak to, I can only speak to what it's like to be a gay man. You're never, or at least, not in modern times, going to completely overhaul the system to, roll out the red carpet for gay, trans, different in any kind of way athletes or coaches or, insert blank here. That's not going to happen, at least in my mind, especially by the route we're taking. Some other route, who knows? But the only thing that's happening right now is a building animosity and backlash against the gay community because the alphabet people are grouped together, right? The LGBTQI plus.
What are they now?
I don't know. But that's not my point. My point is giving people the skill set to be resilient will always, always be more effective than trying to go out there and baby-proof the world, right? To a capacity, you're either going to grow up into a spiritual warrior, or you're not going to grow up. For the longest time, I had no idea how to be a spiritual warrior, like what that even meant. How could I take care of myself? What does it mean to actually be a man?
Well, and I imagine, just to come back to the phrase where we started, is the deepest betrayals come from within, right? I mean, that thing that you're struggling with, did you feel that you were betraying your parents, your religion, or your,
at first I was just buried in shame,
shame.
And couldn't figure out,
because being gay is bad.
Oh, yeah, right? So I was embarrassed for my parents, I was embarrassed for myself, I was embarrassed for... it went on and on and on and on. You didn't even know where to put it. There was so much shame, right? And that's not at all uncommon. That's why we still don't routinely see out gay players at the high levels of, male sports in the United States. The very obvious reason. So, my hope is that part of what we're able to do here and in this podcast is give people going through that process, help them acquire some resilience in dealing with this shit, because it is shit, It, like Admiral William McRaven says in his famous "Make Your Bed" speech, like, if you hope to complete the swim, you're going to have to deal with the sharks, right? There are legitimate sharks in this world, and by thinking or even wishing or trying to believe that, we're going to advance the clock like several generations in time in just a very, very short period of time, like we're not even 10 years down the road of marriage equality being legal, right? So to think that we would turn over centuries of, institutionalized hatred of same-sex couples, specifically males, because, Hugh Hefner figured out a long time ago that we upsell lesbian sex and, have the complete opposite tact when it comes to two men being affectionate, right? That's going to take time. That's really going to take time. And there's parts of this movement that I don't understand, and things that none of us feel, I think, that, we are all of this movement in any capacity.
Yeah. Wow. There is so much to think about, so much provoked, so much consternation, affliction. I don't know. I'm feeling a lot of different
I
things.
think we're going to need a chiron for dictionary chiron at the bottom of our show.
Gotcha. Okay,
all these words.
We'll use good words.
We've got the best words.
And what you're saying, when you talk about the stigma associated to two men in love, right?
Yeah.
And how you talked about the course of time and how how this hatred has been institutionalized. And I have to say, it made me think of, I spend a lot of time in classrooms teaching English. I spend a lot of time on high school campuses, which are several different positions. I'm 53 years old. I've seen a little bit more of the world than you have. Doesn't mean that I'm smarter or I know more, but I'm teaching a book, a very good book, John Krakauer, about, the kid who goes, Chris McCandless, who I think is, in my opinion, he was a saint. Chris McCandless goes to Alaska to find himself, and John Krakauer, this reporter, the story ends up on this table. You know the story. The book is called Into the Wild. But as I'm teaching that book, what part of that book is Chris McCandless's relationship with his father, and he had a very strained relationship with his father. You could say that he kind of lost his mind, if you want to go there, took off to Alaska to find himself, renounced the world, and a lot of it had to do with his father, right? But he did. He ended up in Alaska. The dude died, but standing on his moral. That's what I thought is admirable about that book. So as we're talking about it, I'm talking this in a class of juniors. This is maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. Juniors, 18. Actually, no, seniors. I'm sorry, seniors. Seniors are about to go out in the real world. And my experience with my dad has been a very tenuous, challenging, aggressive, sad, very few times happy. There's just a lot. Yeah. All of us and our dads. So at every opportunity I've ever had when I'm teaching students is talk about the relationship with your dad, I always go to my own experience because it's very close to me. And, the beauty of teaching literature is that you're not really teaching literature, you're teaching life, is what I always like to say, right? Your favorite teacher is always your English teacher because you always can go hang out in the classroom and feel safe in the classroom.
That's true.
So I'm talking about how important, and I've got my serious English teacher face on about how important it is to examine the relationship between Chris McCandless and his father, because that was a catalyst. The cause, or it could be seen as one, because the relationship between a boy and his father is so important. It's crucial to a boy's development. This young man in this class raises his hand, and I say, "Yes, young man, what is your comment?" I wish I could remember his name. He says, "That's not true, Mr. Escalante." And I said, "Say more." I grew up with 2 mothers. Mic drop. First time ever, right? I get goosebumps thinking about it. How do you even reply to that? What do you even say? I felt like a fool. But it's that change that's happening. I mean, these kids are growing up with this, right? Yeah. I mean, these kids started kindergarten, and they go, and especially in the towns that I was teaching in, like I've taught in communities that are tight, these kids started to see that, and it becomes more commonplace. In relation to what you were saying about the stigma and how it's hard for 2 men, especially for 2 men. I think it's gradually changing. And I remember that for me being one of those moments, say, wow, I need to be more cognizant of this. I need to understand that there are kids sitting in this classroom that A, might be gay, B, grew up with 2 moms or 2 dads or whatever, and that things are different. And for educators, it's tricky these days. I mean, where do we go, right? Where do we go?
But here's the thing. Like, educators are working their ass off, and here's what I think we as, young people and kids and members of the LGBTQ plus community need to recognize is 99% of the time, for most people, and especially these days because, you can get canceled or whatever, that when people misspeak or say something that is, you think hurts your feelings or is defamatory or whatever it is, like 99% of the time, there's not ill intent there. There really is not.
I think about racist jokes. I love a good racist joke. I can't lie. I mean, I do. I know a bunch of them.
Right. I mean, when you look at the most popular comedians
They're
of our
racist as
time,
hell.
Dave Chappelle is so popular because he is truthful about matters of race, which previously we felt so uncomfortable about.
And sexuality.
And that he gives us an ability to laugh about these things that are previously, verboten.
And that brings me back to my point, right? Will we ever reach a point where it's just fully accepted? I mean, again, we talked about this in another episode about how being Christian is the worst possible thing you could be these days, right? I mean, if you're in Silicon Valley, Christian is almost a bad word. Let's not go there yet, but yes, but people like Chappelle, things that are happening in the high school classrooms. And I have a dear friend who I consider my stepsister. She wrote a book about coming up Asian, and we get her on one day to speak about her book, growing up Asian and falling in love with a Latina girl for a YA. And, those issues are real for kids. And she framed it all around the poetry of Emily Dickinson and poetry in general. It's a beautiful book, and I want to give Misa Segura a shout out. She's on like her 6th or 7th book now, traveling all around the world and showing off her writing skills. But yeah, so my point in saying all that is, are we making progress? And
obviously,
and but let's come back. We'll bring it back to football, right? Are we going to take it that way? Go down that road? Is it changing in football? Is it easier? Is it harder? Is it the kids going through the same thing? You mentioned something. We're telling these stories to engage our audience, to help people feel like these issues are important. We want to talk about your TED Talk as a gay football player. We want to promote that. We'll certainly play clips on the show. And
we will.
Yes, we will.
No, we will not.
All right, I want to leave you guys with something funny that I read. Kentucky Derby winning jockey Brian Hernandez Jr. just turned down an invitation to the White House, saying, "If I wanted to stare at a horse's ass, I would have finished second." We don't do politics on this show, but that's funny. Or maybe we do politics. If we do racist jokes, we do politics. I'm not choosing a side. I just think that's a funny... See, that's where I separate myself. What I think is funny is funny.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have your political ideologies. That's what the guy said, and it's funny. I'd like to thank our producer. I'd like to thank Butter Up. I'd like to thank my guy Shane Wicks over here next to me. Shane, the insight, the conversation, the energy. Getting this thing set up was getting on my last nerve, but that's just moving in my own way. I'd like to thank our fans. Please see us on X. Please see us on Instagram. Please see us. We'll be live at the Galaxy Theater in LA for the opening of that one film. I can't remember what it's called, but we'll be there. I'm not sure what night that is either, but we'll be there.
Oh, yeah.
You guys should come by.
The stars will be out. It's
going to be awesome. There will be stars, because it will be at night. It's not the right kind of stars. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon. Have a great day whenever you're hearing. We'll see you again. Balls out with Shane Wicks and Ophny Escalante.